Pop it, let it bang. In the field, we like candy cane. Up the top, pop it, let it drink. In the mill, pop it, let it bang. Pop it, pop it. In this life I cannot drink. In the real, we like candy cane. In the field, drop it, let it bang. Pop it, pop it. Yeah. Alright. TJ coming back. Let's rock it. Let's rock it. TJ Dillashaw, baby. All the hype's been against TJ, bro. Ever since TJ won that fight, I've been trying to whoop that style of Corey Sandhagen had into the octagon, right? Like offensive, really long rangey, tactical combinations and shit. How damaging he was. So now it's like, as such, I love TJ. I fight like TJ. I like to imagine I'm fighting his opponents. And I was thinking about Corey Sandhagen. Then I was just thinking about the entire bantamweight division and how threatening those guys are. So I smoked a ball, as you could tell, to really relax and like I like to when I get the best data and analyzing when I'm high as fuck watching the UFC fights. I get more in tuned with the combinations and all the really smart output punches that I wouldn't see before. But really a tactical division. I was really impressed and honestly just with the entire UFC, right? Because the last 2 years, Conor, when the UFC has been in a short, okay, well, in a short term, UFC has been more of like a rising stars, the most potential fighters, the most grand personalities, a real inspiration to pull out the most pay per views because that's how stars are made today, right? You got guys that can really achieve the most biggest and popular things in life, what most people propose they can do if they would have trained harder. People go to UFC events and they pay the pay-per-views and they're super fans because it's more than just a barbaric, brutal sport. As boxing is, it's a showcase of one's skills as an athlete and as a warrior. About character and heart, which is something that everyone thinks they can get a hell of a lot more of, and inspiration that everyone knows that you can't buy heart. Right? No success. It comes from in here. That's how success is made. Is people have it and some people don't, and most people, everybody has it, right? It's just when they'll have their moment and if they can act on it, and which is something that MMA is all about. Small moments that if you don't act on it, you get taken out of there real quick. So it's always had a bunch of fans and has made the biggest superstars, and Conor McGregor, as a big example, or a Brock Lesnar, and you know Israel Adesanya as much. I wouldn't say as much, but as far as a superstar and a super athlete is definitely there, right? Because the last 2 years, UFC has just been a showcase of, while Conor was away, he was the biggest star who brought the most important popularity into MMA and in stardom, what grew it so much, $4.2 billion in the company to be exact. But to not be smart about it, it's hard not to say that the UFC's thrived off of people who make big bucks. And as far as McGregor, who in the last 3 years ago lost to Khabib, didn't show his face that much, and for almost a whole year he was out of commission, which really put everyone else's eyes on the other UFC champions, right? Because it was all about Conor, and now they're back to other fighters. And honestly, if everything that's happened right now happened 3 years ago, everything was just 3 years prior, as far as like the McGregor and Poirier 3. If you had a superstar like that with McGregor 3 years ago and that fight happened, UFC would be done, right? If McGregor was done. Because there was no bigger superstars to really bring people in as far as, good potential, but good fighters. But at the time, it wasn't like that. UFC wasn't seen as it is now, as far as every fighter's got their eyes on them. Like even other champions, guys like Israel Adesanya, Francis Ngannou, Khabib Nurmagomedov have shocked the MMA wide streak and has brought more eyes to fighters that aren't big like McGregor as far as money and maybe superstar or charisma, but show with their fists, right? Those guys don't talk the talk, they walk the walk. And you got guys like Israel Adesanya that can talk a little shit. You got guys like Sugar Sean O'Malley, who are definitely superstars. Jorge Masvidal, 4-second knockout, said he would smack Ben Askren at Whole Foods. Imagine that. Imagine knocking someone the fuck out in 4 seconds and the most possibly biggest MMA fight of the entire year, and then saying, "Hey, I don't give a fuck. I'd slap him up in Whole Foods and win the baddest motherfucker belt," right? Like guys like that have been born and had the chance to get that publicity because McGregor wasn't here, right? Dana White was looking at other people to become superstars because regardless, one way or another, MMA is going to change, right? Like guys are going to come and go. And as far as McGregor, he's a talented fighter, and I want to touch on this a little bit because I've already made this a lot, and I don't care that much to where I would make a video about it. I'm trying to think of a way to really put into perspective how I feel about the McGregor loss, because McGregor is like that's like the elephant in the room in all my YouTube videos is McGregor, right? Because to me, McGregor is such a whirlwind of an athlete, right? Is such a ferocious fighter who eruptified the crowd, and his skill set and energy brings almost as if the fans. It's like gladiatorial. It's Coliseum. It's like Gladiator. How it's a ceremonial beatdown is what these UFC Saturday nights are, right? And with all these fighters coming into fray, have just made it all that much more interesting. And I was going back. I'm a little, I'm a little tensive on trying to explain, because I don't want people to think I'm some hobo speaking MMA magic. But when you look at the last couple of years, basically to bring it back to in the bantamweight division with T.J. Dillashaw, the last 2 years, TJ's been absent, who was before Henry Cejudo, right? I was going back to before Henry Cejudo knocked out T.J. Dillashaw. And 3 years ago, if McGregor and Poirier 3 would have fought 3 years ago, I'm not saying all the other fights didn't happen. I'm saying before the superstars, before Israel Adesanya, before Jorge Masvidal, before Sugar Sean O'Malley, before Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington, right? And all these killers, and the Ultimate Fighter coming back with Brian Ortega and Alexander Volkanovski, before all these super fights and big eyes have came to the sport over the last 2 years, because MMA and the UFC has done so much growth in promoting fighters and putting on great shows, especially since COVID, when there was no other sport but UFC. It kind of took over and got us really into detail and really got the respect it deserves, along with all of its other fighters that have deserved it, right? Guys that deserve that light, like Kamaru Usman, GS, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Justin Gaethje, like guys now that everyone knows their name. Because back then, there was a time where not a lot of people knew these fighters' names, and to a point where killers are beating the heck out of each other on screen while a pandemic is happening. We want to put it, the humans, we like to watch sports, watch TV, and a lot of that things were out of the window, especially for sports, right? MMA was the only thing on, which really took over. It was a brilliant investment and decision for Dan White to come back. But on the topic of MMA, these last 2 years were a lot of growth that TJ Dillashaw wasn't a part of, right? Like, TJ Dillashaw came back, and it was such a big comeback because all UFC has done is grow, right? It's grown, it's picked up, it's a grown fan base to the newer audience that are seeing newer fights and kind of getting more accustomed to it, but may have missed out on previous fighters that aren't big in the UFC as much as anymore. Like guys that have been watching it since 2015 know who the Jeremy the little heathen Stetson is. Really know who Cody Garbrandt is. Guys like Alistair Overeem, people we know and respect and know are dangerous killers, have maybe not have got that eye to newer fans because they really didn't grow up in that era or watch that era, much like TJ Dillashaw. But the people who don't know who those fighters were have added to the UFC. It's added to the fan base, as whereas the old fighters are still stayed. The UFC's only grown, so the fighters that weren't growing and hopping on the UFC MMA train when COVID was hitting and was the only sport to watch, we remember TJ Dillashaw. We remember Cody Garbrandt. We remember all these threats when they were heathens and when they were hot, right? When they were hot on the scene, when it wasn't just Conor making the noise on the media. And now everyone's doing that. Israel Adesanya, ESPN has done a great job at promoting fighters and bringing spotlight to other people. But guys like McGregor are still here. That stardom is still here. And although I would say if that McGregor-Poirier 3 fight happened 3 years ago, that would have been the talk of the town for a whole year, right? It would have been nonstop. McGregor-Poirier 3, McGregor-Poirier 3, McGregor-Poirier 3, McGregor-Poirier 4 would have been the world's mission, right? Because it's the biggest fight in MMA. As for now, we have so many other superstars like, Conor lost, whatever, he'll get his fourth. We're focusing on Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje. We're focusing on, Amanda Nunes versus that chick who's been talking shit in bantamweight, right? That upcoming fight. We're looking at those fights now, and Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington 2, and the chaos that's going to ensue in the welterweight division in Madison Square Garden, 268. Kamaru Usman, motherfucking Nigerian Nightmare, is going, after putting Jorge to sleep, is on a killer train to set a mission to fight Colby Chaos Covington in a rematch. Something that's going to be the biggest welterweight fight in history, and everyone's stoked for it, and everyone loves it, and everyone respects it, because we have the time, the UFC's had the time to promote those fighters, promote these events to where everyone wants to watch them. So, you know what I mean? So now, as I'm high as fuck playing GTA 5, which is amazing, I come to think, you know what? While I'm on the topic of just zoning out and chilling, I want to thank TJ Dillashaw in a time where, in the last 2 years, think about it, TJ was UFC's biggest star, one of the biggest stars, and who lost and was expelled from drug doping and shit. Who, by the way, I just want to be on the topic. To those of you who know TJ Dillashaw, and to those of you who don't know, I'm going to explain it to you. TJ Dillashaw is a UFC fighter who was a tremendous athlete and cheated. He cheated using drugs, steroids, EPO, because not the steroids are more arguable. It's hard not to testify where people were getting away with because there was a way to cheat and to crack the system so you could not see it. I know it's really disrespectful, but it was a lot of dirtiness going around in the MMA where people were testing for steroids but weren't popping for it because they hit it, but they were taking it. And it's hard to not say TJ Dillashaw was one of those peoples because he was such a great performer and he was such an athletic specimen and talented in the division. People try to shy away. It's hard not to not see, hey, that's a possibility, right? That he was taking something because he's so damn good. But then you look at guys like Conor McGregor and people like Roy Jones Jr. and GSP and Khabib Nurmagomedov, who are great goats who never pop for anything, right? Clean as a whistle and earn that from heart and skill. And that's something that TJ always had. And even when he got knocked out in 38 seconds, everybody knew that wasn't the end of TJ Dillashaw, who would be coming back, who, by the way, everybody wanted to see come back. So when awaiting that bout with TJ Dillashaw, he finally came back against Corey Sandhagen, who, as I was saying, is one of those fighters are getting more appreciation for not just their mouth and their charisma, but just their actual skill and the style that people love, and you know how marketable they are. They don't have to be necessarily trash talking to be marketable. You can have trash talking opponents, controversial opponents, to make it marketable, or just straight style matchups like Peter Yan, who should be the champion right now instead of Aljamain Sterling, has so many matchups, so talented, so much speculation about his ability. It makes the bantamweight division so interesting because the bantamweight division is so ruthless. And now you don't have guys like TJ Dillashaw or a prime Cody Garbrandt. Now you can think, or prime Dominic Cruz, Henry Cejudo's retired. All these fighters that weren't those guys are getting a chance to get to the belt. And now they don't have to worry about fighting a Henry Cejudo or a TJ Dillashaw, are not as nervous, right? They don't have that anxiety of, oh, fuck, I got to fight those dudes. Most of these guys are kind of like, thank God Henry Cejudo's retired. Thank God TJ's out for the doping. So it's got a lot of these younger dudes more confidence and ability to, you know, grow as athletes. So now you're thinking these guys have trained hard. They're killers. More confidence. They've grown. They've, you know, stepped up on the pedestal of competition because the bantamweight division has been so active lately. You start thinking, hey, you know what? Peter Yan might have some trouble. Right, TJ Dillashaw might have some trouble. TJ Dillashaw arguably lost that fight against Corey Sandhagen, but because he was so marketable, and because if we want to be really realistic, and you look at the UFC, who has in a lot of ways, you know, beat the best competition, and you know, has had his time off. Guys like Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington, superstars that have came back to the UFC. Have, in the last 2 years, while Conor McGregor has been absent and TJ Dillashaw has been absent and John Jones has been popping nonstop, our biggest stars have been on the pause while other stars have been growing, competing, growing fan bases, and then losing, right? Getting knocked out. Guys like Jorge Masvidal, Israel Adesanya, who have came back. Israel Adesanya did bounce back. Even guys like TJ Dillashaw did bounce back from losses, but these guys and how they lost and took L's and had so many setbacks, right? And guys that came up the rankings so fast are now getting hit. Guys like Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, and name another good, Robert Whittaker, right? Guys that have been coming back, but big stars that did lose, they're now making their mark back and they're coming back and trying to get their honor back, right, to where they were before. And the fan base believed in them so much. The fan base was so big for these guys that even when they lose, they've lost nothing. Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, guys Nate Diaz, perfect example of people that have never given up hope and are looking forward into a Nick Diaz Robbie Lawler 2, a rematch that's been like 12 years in the making. And you know, sorry guys, fucking Ah, ah. Gosh darn it. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. My battery's at 10% and lower, right? So, back what I was saying, now that you can see a new look in my face, I'm going to give this a conversation give this conversation a new startup, right? Because I kind of got a little lost. Your man's a little high. But if I can regroup back to square one, Kamaru Usman and these superstars are growing, like have been taking over the storm. And at this point, TJ Dillashaw to be put in this position where all these bantamweight killers are in a rut and have been fighting animals, killers, have sharpened their skills, while as TJ Dillashaw's been off for the last 2 years, has came back, fought the best fights in Corey Sandhagen, and you look at guys like Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, who are one of the three best bantamweights of all time, along with TJ Dillashaw, who's the third. And these guys who in their prime are unstoppable legends have kind of found their place a little lower. Guys who have reached that age of they're not that guy anymore. They've changed. They're not the fighters they once were, but hold on to the sport because the fans are so damn near. I mean, we love those guys. We love Dominic Cruz. We love Cody Garbrandt. Like, the fan base is still there for those guys. We remember the killers they were. So even when they lose, it's not discouraging because we all fucking remember Cody Garbrandt knocking out, Thomas Almeida, putting him on his head after a fucked up training regimen. A guy who knocked out Marcus Brimage, who was, after a McGregor loss, was coming back in serious heat in the MMA community, going down a weight class in the bantamweight, where he was knocked out by Cody Garbrandt to finally silence it all, being the prodigy of Team Alpha Male and knocking out Dominic Cruz, who was the best bantamweight of all time, only to come back with the most heated Ultimate Fighter of all time, right? Against TJ Dillashaw, who me and my dad watched the entire of The Ultimate Fighter season 25 and were completely blown away by the energy and the rivalry those two guys had, the fire and passion and pride those dudes carried with their hands. So when you have those two super marketable superstar fighters and TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt, who, by the way, were able to co-main an event in Madison Square Garden, which is something I think boxing sometimes flops at, is that they rely on their main card, whereas UFC can have a main card, but to put a cherry on top and make it double as good, have a badass co-main, or have a Sugar Sean O'Malley fight, right, in the Sugar Show on the main card, and just get excited for that, right? The placement they add fighters on the card to, although make big superstars, and although instead of making, let's have Michael Bisping fight George St. Pierre in Madison Square Garden, UFC 217, let's have Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw fight on 218 and make double money in our next pay-per-view. They don't fuck you like that. They put on the co-main. It's like, all right, my G, here's some sprinkle on top for the fans. We love you guys. Here you go. I give you a co-main event that's equally as badass. Sometimes those co-mains can be even better, right? Guys like Wiley Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk going to war, while Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya didn't even maybe throw a jab every 50 seconds. Like, just a very uneventful main event, and had those co-mains that really save the card and really help each other out. The main event gives light on the co-main because it's like, hey, you're watching the big pay-per-view, but you're also looking at these guys who have much more potential, who you like to watch but wouldn't pay to see unless there was more to bring to the pay-per-view, right? If you're paying $60 for a pay-per-view, you're not just going to have one main event unless it's a McGregor card or a Francis Ngannou heavyweight card. You want a whole stacked event. If I'm spending $60, I want 3 title fights, which when UFC does is fucking amazing, right? Because you're watching these killers who are passionate and love to fight as much as you love watching the fight, put on major showcases of talent and fighting ability, only makes those pay-per-views better. But when you look at TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt, who, in a sense of, rocked the rooks off that event in one of the best title fights in history, and TJ, who is marketable, so he has doubled his marketability by fighting Cody Garbrandt and winning back his title, and doing all these things. And Cody Garbrandt, he was the prodigy bantamweight division, beat him in a shocking upset, dominated him in the rematch, who put more light on his ability. TJ won a lot of fans, right? He won a lot of fans, won a lot of talent, and at the end of the day, TJ Dillashaw was really, really amazing. And he had the fans by the balls, and he had all of us by the edge of our seats, wondering when he would fight next. And what he did was Well, before I mention that, I just want to say I love you guys for watching my videos, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn my light on, or put my phone on the charger, right? Who have faced a lot of marketability are now in a sense of fucking fighting guys that now I was talking about TJ. Okay, anyway, basically, yeah, TJ's coming back and he's gonna fucking kill, man. TJ's gonna fucking kill. TJ's coming back, he's gonna whoop some ass and he's gonna dominate. TJ's right, because I'm a big TJ fan. I'm hyped for TJ. This video has just turned into a TJ video. I don't know where I was going with this. I wanted to go back about TJ, you know. TJ, because I like his fighting style. And it's amazing. But I like everyone's fighting style. I love all these UFC fighters who've grown, man. All these UFC fighters who've grown and, you know, fucking, yeah, man. Fuck yeah.